He told me on a Tuesday. Not a Sunday, not a holiday, not some moment that might have made it feel like it meant something. A Tuesday evening in October, while I was standing at the kitchen counter, trying to decide whether I wanted soup or just toast for dinner. He came in without knocking. He still had a key, of course. I'd given him that key 23 years ago when he first moved out, back when I thought a key was a symbol of something, that no matter where he went, this was still home. That was my first mistake, maybe. Not giving him the key. Believing what I thought it meant. He sat down at the kitchen table, and I noticed he didn't take off his jacket. That was the first thing. He always took off his jacket when he came over. He'd hang it on the second hook by the door, the one his father put in when my son was 12 years old, because the boy had a habit of dropping things on the floor. But that Tuesday he kept his jacket on. He sat down and put both hands flat on the table, the way a man does when he's about to say something he's been rehearsing. I turned off the stove and I waited. He said his wife needed help. He said it carefully, like the word help could soften the thing he was about to ask. He said she'd gotten herself into some financial trouble before they married. Credit cards, a failed business, a loan she'd co-signed for a man who turned out to be no one worth trusting. He said the total came to just under $400,000. He said the debt collectors had started calling. He said her wages were about to be garnished. He said he didn't know what else to do. I listened. I kept my hand still on the counter. And then he said it. He said that my house, the house I had lived in for 31 years, the house where I raised him and his sister, the house his father and I bought together and paid off together, and where I had been alone for 7 years since his father passed, he said that house could solve the problem. He said if I refinanced and pulled out equity, it would cover most of it. He said he'd make the payments. He said it like that made it reasonable. I looked at him for a long moment. I looked at his hands flat on my table. Then I said I needed to think about it. He said, okay. He said he understood. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, and he left. And I stood in my kitchen in the quiet, and I thought, I have raised this man. I have known him his whole life, and I am only just now seeing him clearly. My name is Vera, and I am 68 years old, and I have lived in the same house in Columbus, Ohio, for longer than most of the trees on my street have been standing. My husband Leonard passed in the fall of 2018 from a heart attack that came without warning. We had been married for 40 years. We were the kind of couple that other people called boring, and we wore that like a compliment. We paid our bills. We kept the yard. We had 2 children. My son, who I will call by the name he gave himself when he was 4 years old and decided he was a cowboy. I'll call him by his actual name here, and his name is Nathan. And my daughter Bay, who lives in Portland and calls me every Sunday and has never once asked me for anything I wasn't ready to give. After Leonard died, I stayed in the house. People asked me if I was going to downsize, and I told them no. That house was where I knew how to grieve. I knew which floorboard creaked near the bathroom. I knew what the light looked like through the back window in the afternoon. I wasn't ready to learn a new place. I had Leonard's life insurance. I had my retirement from the school district, 32 years as an elementary school librarian, which is the kind of job that doesn't make you rich but keeps your soul in good condition. I had the house, which was paid off. I was not wealthy, but I was stable. I was fine. Nathan was 38 when his father died. He had been married once before, briefly, in his early 30s. A woman named Celeste who was kind and careful, and who left after 3 years for reasons Nathan never fully explained to me. I didn't push. I figured he'd talk about it when he was ready, and he never really was. He met his second wife about 2 years after Leonard passed. Her name is Christine. She was 41, polished. The kind of woman who always looked like she'd just come from somewhere important. She worked in marketing. She had opinions about everything and stated them like they were facts. The first time I met her, she walked through my living room looking at things, the way people look at things in a store they're not sure they want to shop in. I told myself I was being ungenerous. I told myself grief does strange things to perception. I told myself my son was happy, and that was enough. They got married 14 months after they met. A small ceremony, which was fine. I sat in the front row and I smiled, and I meant it, mostly. They moved into an apartment. Nathan had a steady job in logistics management. Christine freelanced, she said, though I was never entirely clear on what the freelancing involved. They seemed fine. And then about a year into the marriage, they hit trouble. Not the kind of trouble that couples work through, the kind that has a dollar amount attached. Christine had debt, real debt, the kind that had been accumulating for years before Nathan ever met her. Credit cards from a period in her 30s when she was, as Nathan put it, trying to build something. A personal loan from a private lender at an interest rate I would have recognized immediately as predatory if I'd seen it, and a co-signed business loan with a former partner who had since declared bankruptcy and left her holding the full amount. Nathan said the total was close to $400,000. He said the interest alone was burying them every month. He said they couldn't afford their apartment anymore. He said he'd done everything he could think of. He asked if they could move in with me. Just temporarily, he said, just until they got their footing. I said yes. Of course I said yes. It was my son. They moved in on a Saturday in February. Nathan carried boxes in quietly, the way he'd always done things, careful and a little apologetic. Christine directed the movers like a woman who had directed movers many times before. She had a great deal of furniture. Some of it was beautiful. She arranged it in the living room in a way that looked nothing like how I'd had the room for 30 years, and she did it without asking me. I told myself it was her home too, for now. I gave them the large bedroom. I stayed in the smaller one at the end of the hall. The room that had once been my sewing room, where I'd moved after Leonard passed, because I couldn't sleep in our room alone yet. The room was small, but it was mine. I had my chair by the window and my books and my photographs. The first few weeks were manageable. Nathan worked long hours. Christine was home most of the time, working, she said, from her laptop at the kitchen table. She was pleasant when she wanted to be, and quiet when she didn't want to be, and I learned quickly which moods were which. But gradually, things shifted. She stopped asking and started assuming. She rearranged the kitchen. Not to be helpful, but because she said the layout didn't make sense. She threw away a set of containers I'd had for 15 years because she said they were old and the lids didn't seal. She had opinions about my cleaning habits, which she delivered as suggestions, and which felt like something else entirely. She began referring to the guest bathroom as our bathroom in a way that left no room for the word my. I said nothing. I've been in long relationships. I know how to let things settle. What I didn't know was that she was already talking to Nathan about the house. I found out by accident, the way you find out most things that people don't intend for you to know. I came downstairs one night for a glass of water and stopped in the hallway when I heard voices. Not arguing. That's what got me. They were calm, they were planning. I heard Christine say my name. Not Mom, never Mom, always Vera. And I heard her say that the equity in my house was just sitting there. I heard Nathan say he didn't know how to bring it up. I heard her say that he needed to just be direct. I heard him say he'd try. I went back upstairs without my water. I sat in my chair by the window for a long time. I want to tell you that I was angry. I was. But the thing underneath the anger was something quieter and more durable, and it was this. I was not surprised. I had been watching Christine for 3 months, and I understood by then what she was. She was not a bad person in the way that people mean when they call someone bad. She was something more specific. She was a person who had decided, at some point in her life, that the rules that governed other people did not fully apply to her. That was the thing Leonard would have spotted in the first 5 minutes. That was the thing I had been telling myself I was wrong about. I was not wrong. The next few weeks, I watched more carefully. I watched Nathan. I watched the way he looked at me when I walked into a room, the way his eyes would flick to Christine first, checking something. I watched the way Christine spoke to me, how her voice had taken on a particular patience, the kind people use with the elderly or the infirm. I watched how she'd begun answering my phone when it rang as she got to it first, and how she'd started telling my friends I was resting. I made an appointment with my attorney. His name is Howard, and he's been my attorney since Leonard and I bought the house. I told him everything. I told him about the conversation in the hallway. I told him about the equity. I told him what I expected was coming. Howard listened without interrupting, which is the thing I've always appreciated about him. Then he said, "Let's make sure everything is in order before they make a move." We spent 2 sessions going over the house, the deed, my will, my accounts. I had already put the house in a revocable living trust when Leonard passed. Howard had recommended it then, and I'd done it. That trust protected the house from a lot of things, but there were still steps to take, and I took them. I didn't tell Nathan any of this. I want to be honest about that. I kept my counsel because I had heard him in that hallway, and I knew he was coming to me with something prepared, and I needed to be prepared first. He came to me on that Tuesday in October, and I told him I needed to think. What I did not tell him was that there was nothing left to think about. After that Tuesday, things in the house changed in a way I don't know how to describe, except to say that the air changed. Christine began treating me with a particular kind of warmth that I recognized immediately as performance. She brought me coffee in the mornings. She asked about my health. She started calling me by my first name more gently, like she was softening it. Nathan tried again 2 weeks later. He sat down with me at the kitchen table, and he said he understood it was a lot to ask, but that they were running out of options. He said that if I refinanced, not signed anything over, just refinanced, and pulled $250,000 in equity, it would eliminate the worst of the debt and give them a chance to breathe. He said he and Christine would handle the new mortgage payments. He said it was still my house. I asked him to walk me through what that meant, the payments, the timeline, the terms. He had numbers. He'd done research. He put it in a spreadsheet. I looked at the spreadsheet. I asked questions. I asked what happened if they couldn't make the payments. I asked what happened if they divorced. I asked what happened to me if I got sick and needed to sell the house for care. He had no answers for those questions. Christine did, from across the room where she was pretending not to listen. She said those were very negative ways to think about it. I said I'd continue thinking. The warmth cooled after that. Christine stopped bringing me coffee. She started having conversations with Nathan in their bedroom, with the door closed, which they hadn't done before. The house felt occupied in a new way, occupied and watched. Then one morning I came downstairs and found that someone had gone through the filing cabinet in the small study off the kitchen. Nothing was taken, but things were out of order. I keep very specific order in my files. I have kept that order for 20 years. The folder with the house documents had been moved. I took it upstairs with me. I didn't say anything. I called Howard that afternoon. The thing I want to say about what happened next is that it wasn't dramatic. I don't have a dramatic nature. Leonard used to say that I was the most quietly determined person he had ever known, and I think that's right. I don't fight loud. I go still, and I think, and then I do the thing. I found an apartment, a 1-bedroom in a quiet building about 4 miles from my house, in a neighborhood I'd always liked. The building had a community room and a small garden out back, and a manager named Dorothea, who had kind eyes and didn't ask too many questions. The rent was manageable. I paid the first 2 months and the security deposit in cash from my savings, and I told Dorothea I'd be moving in on the 1st of December. I told no one, not Bay, not my friend Constance from the library, who was my closest friend and who would have had many opinions about this, not Howard, not yet. I started moving things quietly. Not furniture. I didn't want the furniture, most of it, but the things that mattered. The photographs, the good china that had been Leonard's mother's, the wooden box from my own mother's house, The one that held her letter, my books, my important documents. The small things that don't look like anything to anyone else and are everything to me. Over the course of 3 weeks, I moved them in my car, a few boxes at a time, on mornings when Nathan was at work and Christine was asleep. She slept late. I had always been up before 6. I called Howard and told him what I was doing. He did not try to talk me out of it. He said he had something ready for me to sign, and I went to his office on a Thursday and I signed it. The revocable living trust was amended. The terms of my will were updated. The house was protected in a specific and legal way that I am not going to detail here, because I don't think those details are the point. The point is, I knew what I was doing. I had known for months. On the morning of November 30th, I woke up at 5. I made coffee. I sat in my chair by the window in my small room, and I looked at the room, the walls, the light, the photograph of Leonard that sat on the dresser, and I said goodbye to it the way you say goodbye to a version of your life. Not with sadness, exactly. With honesty. I left a note on the kitchen table. It was short. It said that I had decided to give them space and that I had made other arrangements. It said the house was mine and would remain mine. It said that if Nathan wanted to discuss the situation when he was ready to be honest, he could call me. It said I loved him, because I do, and I needed to say it even then. I put my last bag in the car. I drove to my new apartment in the early morning before Columbus was fully awake. Dorothea let me in, handed me the key, told me to let her know if I needed anything. I closed the door behind me and stood in the small, clean, empty room. I was okay. Nathan called that morning at 8:15. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that started out confused and ended up something else. He called twice more that day. Christine called once from a number I didn't recognize at first, and when I realized it was her, I let that go too. I called Bea. I told her everything, the hallway conversation, the spreadsheet, the filing cabinet, all of it. She was quiet on the phone for a long time, and then she said, "Mom, I've been worried about this since they moved in." She said she wished I'd told her sooner. I told her I needed to handle it my own way first. She understood. That's the kind of daughter she is. 2 weeks after I left, Howard sent a certified letter to the house. The letter outlined the legal status of the property, the terms of the trust, and a clear and formal notice that any attempt to access, leverage, or encumber the property without my written consent would constitute a legal violation with specific consequences. He'd drafted it carefully, and I'd read every word. It said what it needed to say without venom. I was told later by Nathan, when we finally spoke, that Christine read the letter and did not speak for the rest of the evening, that he sat across from her in the kitchen of my house, in the house that was never going to be what she'd planned, and understood something that I think he'd been avoiding understanding for a long time. We spoke for the first time, really spoke, about 6 weeks after I left. He called and I answered, and he started to explain, and I let him. And when he was done, I asked him one question. I asked whether he had known about her debt before they got married. He said yes. I said, "Then you knew what you were coming to ask me for." There was a long silence. He said he was sorry. He said it twice. I believe he was. I also believe that being sorry and having done the thing can both be true at the same time, and that love doesn't require you to pretend otherwise. He and Christine left my house in January. They're renting a 2-bedroom in a different part of the city. I don't know what they're doing about her debt. I think that's the right way to leave it. I went back to my house in February. I opened the windows even though it was cold. I put the photograph of Leonard back on the mantel where it belongs. I put the kettle on, and I sat in the kitchen, my kitchen, and I let the quiet settle back around me like something that had been waiting. There are people who will hear this story and think I should have fought, that I should have called a lawyer sooner, or confronted them directly, or said something louder than I did. I understand that impulse, I have felt it myself looking back. But I am 68 years old and I have learned this. The loudest thing I ever did was stay quiet long enough to see clearly. The bravest thing I ever did was leave before I was pushed. I built this life with my own 2 hands and with Leonard's, and I am not going to let anyone take it apart, least of all someone who kept their jacket on at my kitchen table like they didn't intend to stay long. I'm still here. This is still mine. And that is the end of the story. I've thought a lot about what I would tell a younger version of myself if I could. Not the version in her 30s, full of energy and certainty. The version in her late 50s, just after Leonard died, when I thought the hardest part was already behind me. I'd tell her, the hardest part isn't grief. The hardest part is learning to see clearly when your heart would rather not. I loved Nathan the way you love something you made with your own hands. That kind of love has a blindness built into it. When Christine walked through my living room looking at things like they were already hers, I felt it. I registered it the way you register a wrong note in a song, something off, something that shouldn't be there, but I talked myself out of trusting what I felt, because I wanted to be fair, because I didn't want to be the mother-in-law who couldn't let her son go. What I've come to understand is that fairness and foolishness are not the same thing, and I confused them for too long. Here is what I believe, not from any doctrine or tradition, but from 68 years of watching how things actually unfold. The choices people make consistently, over time without an audience, are who they are. Christine did not become someone who took without asking when she moved into my house. She already was that person. The house just gave her room to show it. And Nathan did not become someone who chose a prepared spreadsheet over his mother's security in one Tuesday evening. The choosing had been building in him quietly, fed by hundreds smaller moments where he picked her version of the story over his own better judgment. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because I think it matters to name things accurately. When you name something accurately, you can respond to what it actually is instead of what you wish it were. The thing I'm most proud of, and I don't say that lightly, because pride is something I've always held carefully, is that I didn't wait to be pushed. I've known women who waited, who stayed in situations that were diminishing them, month by month, because leaving felt like admitting something had gone wrong, as if staying were dignity and leaving were defeat. I used to half believe that myself, but there is a particular kind of strength that doesn't look like strength from the outside. It looks like a woman driving her car to a new apartment at 5 in the morning, with boxes in the back seat and a key in her pocket, and no one watching. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't need an audience. It just moves steadily toward what is right and away from what is not. I left before I was forced to leave, and that distinction matters more to me than I can fully explain. It means I chose. It means the house is still mine, not because I fought for it in some dramatic confrontation, but because I never stopped being the person who owned it. In every sense of that word. Nathan is my son, and I will love him until I don't exist anymore. But love doesn't require you to fund someone else's bad decisions, or to stand still while your own life is quietly being rearranged around you. Real love, the kind that holds up over decades, has a spine in it. It tells the truth. It holds the line. I'm back in my house now. The photograph of Leonard is back on the mantel. The kitchen is mine again. The quiet is mine again. I'm 68 years old, and I am exactly where I am supposed to be. And I got here by trusting what I knew, even when trusting it was hard.